everyone, and welcome to the first episode of Women in Business. Today, we have an advocate, educator, and strategist passionate about seeing other women and minority executives succeed. She's the CEO of ARG Coaching and Consulting, the founder of the We Are Project, and a former president of the Phoenix chapter of the National Association of Women Business Owners. Please welcome Angela Garmon. Angela, we are so happy to have you.
Thank you for having me. I'm
okay,
super excited to be here.
Just to start off, we obviously know that you are an extremely accomplished woman and entrepreneur. Could you just tell us a little bit about yourself so the audience can get to know you?
Oh my goodness. So I'll go ahead with the personal since you kind of introduced who I am professionally. So personally, I am a mother of a beautiful 25-year-old. Her name is Janae Melissa, and I enjoy source to anyone that might need a helping hand somewhere.
You've definitely been a great resource to us, so we can just say thank you.
You're welcome.
So next, sorry, I think I cut out for a second, but I am back now, so we'll continue. And your backstory is really inspiring to us, and we just want to know, obviously our audience is mainly going to be consisting of high school women. So when you were in high school, did you ever expect to be where you are now?
No. So let me just tell you, I am from this small town called Educator. It's in Illinois. And in Decatur, all we knew were the four walls. And so our mother, I grew up with a mother who she didn't even have a high school graduation. She never graduated from high school. So she always promoted education to us. But she just told us, get a 9 to 5. That's the most stable thing that you could ever do in your life, right? And so all we had were factories in my hometown, the post office, of course, and then you had restaurants, etc. So there was never even this thought or notion that I could potentially be a business owner. And so, I just thought I would work a 9 to 5 for the rest of my life. And just make a living for my daughter and I. There was never a thought of being an entrepreneur at all.
I guess jumping off of that, what really inspired you to pursue a career in entrepreneurship and business?
Okay, so my mom was dead wrong. So there is nothing stable about a 9 to 5. So I worked for a company. I worked for Starwood Hotels and Resorts for pretty much the bulk of my adult life. And about 12 to 15 years into this hotel career, and I climbed my way up this corporate ladder. I was an interim director of finance when the company decided to sell the property that I was at. And so when the property sold, two of us lost our jobs. Both of our names were Angela. And between the two of us, we had over 30 to 40 years of experience in the hospitality industry. And they didn't place us, nor did we have an alternative route, right? And so I realized really quickly that there was nothing stable about an organization, right? They can eliminate your job at any point. And so when I got laid off, I think it was less than 30, 40 days later, they actually called me back to start contracting with the company. And so I would leave on a Monday and come back to Arizona on a Friday. And so that really launched my endeavors into kind of the contract consulting world. And I have been taking strides towards that. That was in 2013, I believe. And so I've been taking strides towards where I am now since 2013, believe it or not. I launched a first company, I want to say right around 2014. And then I launched this current company in 2016.
That's really impressive. We definitely aspire to be like that. And it's really cool how even after so much time doing one thing, a lot of times it can be hard to change. So we really think it's cool that you were able to kickstart a career in consulting. So as a Black woman in this field, we know that you must have encountered a lot of challenges trying to build up to what you are today. So could you elaborate on some of your greatest challenges and how you were able to overcome them?
So I often say that change is inevitable, but how you handle that change is optional, right? So choose to conquer it. So I am 5 years into this business, and about 2 years in, I was diagnosed with invasive ductal carcinoma, which is a form of breast cancer. So had you seen me 2 years ago, I would have been completely bald head, walking around looking like a Wakanda warrior, right? And so that was one of the biggest hurdles that I faced in such a short period of time with launching my business. And so what I always tell people, regardless of the age, like you can't necessarily plan for something as like a diagnosis of cancer, right? But you can always plan for what could potentially happen. And so what I realized on the front end as I was becoming an emerging business owner is that I had prepared myself for a slow revenue growth. I had put some other measures in place, which really helped me over that time. I went through chemotherapy, radiation, and a couple of surgeries over a 18-month period of time. But because I had already planned for some potential barriers in my business, it actually didn't hinder me at all, right? But then also, as I was going through this season of change, I made the decision on the front end to define my situation instead of it defining me. And I think that so many times when we're going through life, especially when we're having challenges, sometimes we allow those barriers, those challenges to define who we are in that moment instead of us choosing to define it. So if I can give any advice at all, it would be to define your situation before the world defines it for you, and then figure out and put the right measures in place to move yourself forward in the midst of it. Another challenge that we face, and I'll talk about it from a business ecosystem perspective in Arizona. So Arizona prides itself in being gender and race neutral. And you ladies know, especially being in that financial literacy world and economics, right? What doesn't get measured doesn't grow. And so where women business owners in Arizona are fast growing, we just haven't produced the revenue as fast as some of our other counterparts in other states. And so, being aware of some of the challenges that really exist in your ecosystem or in your communities can help you also position your business a little bit better and differently if you're looking at it from a business aspect.
That's some really amazing advice, and I think ones that Neha and I can apply, and anybody who chooses to listen to this. In fact, one of the reasons we started Invest in Her is that we noticed young women faced a lot of challenges and got discouraged early on. You talked a lot about your experience with cancer and starting up your business, but I was hoping you could recall an experience where you doubted yourself and how you were able to overcome that.
Oh. You know what? I think that self-doubt kind of creeps in more often than we care to actually recognize or give credence to. But, when I think about even this pandemic, right? Coming into this pandemic, I realized quickly that I didn't have the ability to reach my specific demographics, right? And so I had to figure out, okay, Angela, what are you going to do over this time? Are you just going to sit still, or are you actually going to do something about it? And I think that, in the back of my mind, I began to listen to people as they were like, I remember one day my sister was like, oh, well, it said that 41% of Black businesses are already failed, right? And so that people don't realize that sometimes what they say impacts us personally. And so I had to really begin to, again, that reframing in my mind that I can overcome this. And so really what I did, Caitlin, is going back to what I said earlier, I began to look at what is our current environment teaching us. So first of all, everybody pivoted so quickly to online businesses. So I created an online school so that I can continue to help people who wanted to scale and grow their businesses. So I started creating course content. I also started attending more networking events that were virtual. And so really finding a way to reposition my business, reposition my brand, and get myself out there. So it's always that reframing, Caitlin.
Yeah, that's really cool. So we were really amazed by all the ways that you were able to adapt to change. And especially, I think your motto is that you can conquer change. We thought that was really impressive too. So on the journey to becoming such an powerful woman in your career, who are some female role models who inspired you?
Oh my goodness, there are a few. You know, when I think about the business world specifically, there is a lady, Jackie Wazalek. She owns Modlux Print, so I always say she's the largest woman-owned print company in the Valley. But when I first was introduced to NABO, National Association of Women Business Owners, Jackie was actually the first woman that welcomed me into the group. But more importantly, she wanted to know, Angela, how can I assist you? And so, you know, one thing that I've learned is that you really do need a mentor. You really need somebody that's going to rally behind you, especially as women. We're relationship driven. And we need those connections. And sometimes, truthfully, ladies, we just need somebody to say, you got this, right? And so Jackie was that person for me. And then I come from a tribe of women. So my parents had 4 girls. I'm the baby. But all of my sisters and my mother, they truly rallied behind me. And then also my daughter. So my daughter is an entrepreneur herself. She's a social entrepreneur. So she started a YouTube channel. And she does production and directing. And so for me, when I think about like the greatest influences of my life, those are the people. And when I think about my daughter, I want to be better for her every single day. And so those are the influences in my life.
Sounds like you have a real girl tribe around you. And I think more women definitely need that. So, how would you recommend women network, especially ones who aren't familiar with business or economics, or even something like consulting?
So I always say start with your area. So whomever your demographics is, right? So if you want to work with women, find women networking groups to connect with. If, for example, you're interested in banking or hospitality, find associations that are specific to those areas so that you can really begin to, first of all, hone your skills, make connections in those industries, and then don't forget to follow up. Oh my gosh, let me tell you how important that is. Because if you start networking, it's one thing just to go to a networking event. It's another thing to put it into action afterwards. So, you know, so many times we go to grab these business cards, but what are you going to do with these business cards once you got them? So really follow up, network, and don't just make it about the transaction, make it about the connection, make it about the interaction. And so really get to know the people that you're connecting with, that you're networking with, and figure out what they need so that you can help them with their connections. And so when they need something, they'll in return think of you.
Yeah, I think you mentioned earlier the National Association of Women Business Owners. That seems like a really great organization for girls who are interested in business. Seems like exactly what you're talking about, a place where women can network, especially in the fields of economics and business. So your work with the NAWBO Phoenix was phenomenal. And would you like to tell us a little bit more about your chapter and the work you've done there, as well as any other organizations that women can look to if they're interested in networking in business?
You know, NABO on a national level and even on a local level, we are really founded on 4 pillars. The one that I'll talk about right now is advocacy, right? And so advocacy for women in business. And so to your point, you know, what is it that I think it was Caitlin that asked, you know, really about networking, but what is it that you're passionate about, right? And so as you begin to connect with people, what is it that you're passionate about, or organizations? And so I really connected with NABO because of their advocacy efforts for women in business. And because I had this slow start in business, I really needed a group, a tribe that would come behind me and that could see some of the challenges, or that could actually understand some of the challenges that impact me. And so as a business owner. And so when I think about other organizations, I also think about Women's Enterprise Foundation, so WEF Phoenix. So Women's Enterprise Foundation, they provide scholarships and grants for women businesses. So they give micro grants. And so if you guys are ever interested, they do provide micro grants and scholarships. And so they have been a great resource for me. There are some other free resources like the SBDC, so Small Business Development Center. Another tribe or community that I'm part of is called WeBank, or locally it's called WeBank West. And so that's WBEC West. And so it stands for Women Business Enterprise Council. And they actually are one of the largest, WeBank is one of the largest certification agents for women enterprises. And so what they do is essentially they help to differentiate your brand. So I am a certified WBE. So it just means that my business is certified as a diverse supplier. And so when I work with corporations, that kind of gives me a leg up. And so those are the organizations that I'm part of. And so what I am most proud of is over my tenure with NABO, we actually received our first 5-star chapter. So we're recognized as a 5-star chapter 2 years in a row. And then secondly, the chapter for the first time was recognized as the chapter of the year. And so we got, we had the highest retention rates, we had the highest members over, even through COVID, and some other accolades that the national chapter recognized us for. And then we won a Silver Stevie Award for our response through COVID. So we had some amazing things going on. Had amazing vice president, and then also a couple of people on the board that were just absolutely amazing and mind-blowing. Couldn't have done it without the community.
I mean, everything that you have just talked about is so awesome, and you clearly have the leadership, the experience to really help these organizations thrive. And you're very passionate about advocacy, like you just said. And we know that increasing female and minority representation has been a large part of your personal and professional brand. Could you talk about some ways that you've really tackled this issue, especially how it's kind of related to this strange online world we've all been pushed into?
Yes. So let me tell you, I'm wearing my We Are Project shirt. So I launched the We Are Project. And so here's the We Are Project box. And so I'll tell you, the We Are Project is launched as an advocacy effort for minority women-owned businesses. So did you know that an additional $981 billion would have been generated in additional revenue in 2019 had parity been reached for minority women-owned businesses? And if parity were reached for just African-American women-owned businesses alone, an additional $522 billion would have been generated. So I launched the We Are Project box right at it launched this month for March, but I've been working on it since August. And really that goal of that project is to shrink the disparity gap that exists for minority women-owned businesses. And also to create awareness, because many people do not realize that, just to give you another statistic, in 2019, a Black woman-owned firm brought in $24,000 per firm on an annual basis against our white counterparts at $218,000. Huge difference, huge difference. So what impacts that? Access to capital, access to the proper network, and the ability and the resources that are needed for scaling and growing, right? And so I am a true advocate and educator, and I just want to help close that gap. Recently, my nonprofit just won $500,000 to support 20 minority-owned businesses across the state of Arizona. And all of that, yes. And so all of that is just due to really everything is like the steps that I've taken before, and just making sure that I'm present, making sure that I understand what's going on around me, and just doing something about it, just being vigilant.
I mean, we are all about closing inequities and gaps here at Invest in Her. So if you could forward us information about the We Are project, we will definitely link that below in social media posts and the YouTube link.
Love it. Sure will.
Yeah, definitely. We love supporting women who are interested in economics and business, but we know that when trying to move up the corporate ladder and become successful, women are often called out for being too aggressive or unapproachable or any other misogynistic stereotypes that you can think of. So, how are some ways that you have dealt with these stereotypes? And I think you mentioned before your corporate experiences. So,
yes. So, you know what, Neha, what I tell people all the time is deal with it head on, right? So many times, especially as women, we don't want to be labeled, but it's too late. We're already labeled, right? People are already, they will always make assumptions about you, but just tackle it. When I was president of NABO, you walk into rooms, right? And as a Black woman, they don't expect you to be president in many cases. I mean, in Arizona, we Black people represent less than 3% of the population, right? And so I've always been in this space where I'm typically the only Black manager, the only Black leader. But when I see inequities, when I hear people say you're unapproachable or you're aggressive or you're mean, then I ask them what makes them say that I'm mean. What, and so I cause them to question their own biases that exist in their mind. And so there was this one situation in particular where a lady had discriminated against another person of color. And when it came to my attention, I called a meeting. And I didn't tell her that she was discriminatory. I allowed her to come up with her own conclusion. I just said, I want to share an experience. So from my perspective, I always share the experience, and how you translate it is up to you, right? All I can do is bring awareness to you about it, and then hope that you would correct it. And then also, I think that having conversations um, about race is important. So a part of the We Are project box are conversation cards, so that you can begin to have these deeper conversations in your community around race, diversity, inequities, etc. Because I think that it starts there. It starts with the conversation, and it starts with uncovering some of those unconscious biases that might exist, or even some of those blatant racisms that kind of play around in our minds, right? And so just having those conversations and just calling it out and asking those questions so people can really formulate, am I being racist? Am I discriminating? And then allow them to process through it.
That is wonderful advice. Neha and I, as young women of color, definitely could apply that in some uncomfortable situations that have come up and probably will come up. But since we're kind of closing up today's episode, you already mentioned some really great tidbits of advice for young women. But what's one final thought that you would like to leave our audience with?
Ladies, okay. So I always say, write your own narrative. So many times we allow someone else's views, our parents, right? Our parents' views, our friends' views, people, even strangers. We allow them to shape the stories in our mind, or we allow them to shape how we show up in life. Write your own narrative. I mean, it's your life for a reason, and live boldly. Live boldly in it, and whatever you choose to do it until you don't want to do it anymore, right? So don't give up, push through. And so, to Neha's point, one of my slogans is conquer change and cultivate results. You are going to endure some tough times, but you can do it. You can get through it. You can conquer it. You just have to know and believe in yourself and make it happen.
That's really nice to hear. I know Caitlin and I, as we are trying to grow as female economists, we often just think like, can I actually do this? And I think you mentioned earlier, a lot of times the only thing that women really need is just someone supporting them, saying, you got this, you can do it. And I honestly could not relate to that more. I think that's definitely a really great last piece of advice for any of our viewers watching this.
Neha, can I say one more thing?
Yeah.
So I was reading this statistic that said something to the effect that if there is a job and there are, like, let's say 10 qualifications, women feel that they have to meet all 10 of those qualifications in order to apply. Ladies, that is not true. They said that somewhere like 85% of men will apply, even if they only meet 2 of those qualifications, right? And so be bold. If you know that you can do it, do it. Don't wait to check off all of those boxes. Know and understand your capabilities, and don't let anybody stop you again. And then I'm off my soapbox.
I think we do have
an awesome closing thought.
We do have a few more minutes. Go ahead. Sorry, I was just going to add something that we've actually also encountered. So while we were starting Invest in Her, an interesting statistic that we came across is that women on average actually have higher returns on their investment portfolios than men, but they're just afraid to invest more. Like the amount of women who invest is much lower, but it doesn't make sense because on average they have higher returns, which shows that women kind of just need to put themselves out there. And we think that in a world where women did that, we could have much better results.
Yeah, we're risk adverse. We are much more risk adverse than men. Many times we lead with our feelings and our emotions. I work with clients all the time that says, Angela, I just don't feel like I have enough money. I don't feel like I'm making any money. But when you actually look at their numbers in black and white, and to your point, statistics, black and white, you can see that they're like a 40% increase year over year, and their bottom line is improving. And so don't lead from your feelings, get it in black and white, and look at it holistically. Try to remove yourself and your feelings from it, and just really look at the results that you're producing.
Kaylin, I don't know if you want to add anything. If not, I think that's all we have for today's webinar. So thank you so much for that advice. And we know that it's going to be very helpful. Everything that you said is definitely going to help us as we are pursuing our journeys in economics and business. Angela, your story is so inspiring to young women, and we know that our audience will learn so much from you. To all of our viewers out there, if you enjoyed this video, please stay tuned for our future episodes. As we mentioned earlier, this is part of our Women in Business series, and you have a lot to look forward to as we continue to support women in business. Lastly, don't forget to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Thank you so much.